take a look at how to write a compound inequality from a graph on a number line. So the first thing you want to take a look at is decide whether it's going to be the graph of an and or an or compound inequality. This should be number one. So when we go about that, we want to remember that or compound inequalities often have two completely separate pieces to them, like an example in number one, right? We have a section on the left or a section on the right. We have two different options to kind of pick from, and that's the hallmark of an or compound inequality. So when we write an or compound inequality, we're essentially just going to write two inequalities and link them together with that word or, which tells us that we can satisfy the requirements of one or the other. So we're just going to write them both separately. So the one on the left would be that x is less than -4, right? We're not going to use equal to because that's an open circle. Or our second one is that x could be greater than 3. So our next inequality is an and compound inequality. So we're going to actually go to the right at number 3. This is an and there are two different ways to write this. So we can use the linking word and, or we can write it as one continuous inequality. So oftentimes when we look at this inequality, we read this as saying that we're looking at the values between -7 and 1. So when we go to write this inequality, the best way to do that is to say, okay, x is in between the values -7 and 1, and now we need inequality symbols. Well, we know that x needs to be greater than -7 or equal to. So when we write that, we're kind of writing this backwards. So the greater than, x is the bigger one. So the open side needs to be towards the x. And we know that x needs to be less than or equal to 1. In general, when we write an inequality like this, our inequality symbols are always going to be less thans when it is in the correct format. And then we just need to determine, is it less than or equal to? The second way to write this, which is a little less formal, is to use the word and. And we can write two separate inequalities. So really, we have two inequalities here, right? We have this one at 7 and going to the right. Then we have that one at 1 going to the left, and we only described their overlap on the graph. So we can write this as x is greater than or equal to -7, and x is less than or equal to 1. Either of those answers is acceptable. So let's keep going. I'm going to default to writing and inequalities the first way. That's typically considered more proper. Okay, so this one is x is in between -2 and 5. Okay, so x is in between -2 and 5. Remember, these are going to be both less thans. One on the left here, that's an open circle, so I'm not going to put an equal to under it. But the one on the right, that's a closed circle, so it can be equal to 5 there. Okay. So this next one, number 2, we're going to have to approximate because we're somewhere in between 30 and 40 there for one of those. This is an or, right? We can pick from the left inequality or the right. So we're going to have that x is less than or equal to, because it's that closed circle, about 35, or x is greater than, we're going to leave it as just greater than because that's an open circle, about 50. All right, next one. Again, this is an or. X is less than or equal to -4 to describe that first inequality, or second, x is greater than or equal to 1. Last one, this is an and, right? We have to be between. So we say x, we're between 0 and 40, and we're going to have less thans for each of these because we have open circles on either end, no equals to.